Off the Secretary of State today. What's the message that the president is sending by having Jared Kushner be the one to take this trip?
I don't think it's not a binary choice. In this particular case, both Jared Kushner and Tom Bossert, the assistant to the president for Homeland Security, are on the trip at the request and invitation of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was going there and believed it was an opportunity for both of them. It's ironically the first trip for both Mr. Kushner and Mr. Bossert. They're going to receive briefings and updates with respect to what's going on the ground, our military involvement there, and our efforts to defeat ISIS. Jared's going to specifically express the commitment of the United States to the government of Iraq, meet with U.S. personnel engaged in the campaign, and Mr. Bossert will participate in meetings and briefings to reinforce the strong U.S.-Iraqi partnership to defeat ISIS. But it's not like this is a one-shot deal. In the course of conversation and extensive meetings, that invitation was extended and they took it up.
His portfolio is jam-packed and has grown in recent weeks. Among the things that's our understanding that are in his portfolio, he is to broker Middle East peace and overhaul the federal government. Can he do all of these things?
I think not to. It's not like he has a team that he oversees, and I think there's a lot of areas that he has been working very diligently on behalf of the government, on behalf of the president's agenda. So going over and getting a first-hand understanding of the work that's being done to thank the government of Iraq, to see some of the sacrifice and progress that our team is making on the U.S. side is an opportunity that I think every government official and every member of the media should frankly take advantage of if offered that opportunity. Matt?
A recent ProPublica report out today revealed that President Trump can draw money from his businesses at any time without disclosing it. So on that, I have two questions.
Okay.
One, has the president withdrawn any money from his businesses since taking office? And two, can the White House commit that the president will disclose future withdrawals if they take place?
I'm not sure what he's withdrawn. I think that I'm somewhat surprised in the sense that anyone would find it shocking. A blind trust, or any kind of trust rather, the whole entire point of setting it up is that somebody can withdraw money. I mean, that's frankly part of the point of setting it up. So
then why was this change not made? It was made after.
No, that just. No, I do. But again, I think that you just went and started to say this change was made. I'm not aware that there was any change. Just because a left-wing blog makes the point of something changing doesn't mean it actually happened. I'm not aware that there was ever a change in the trust. And the idea that the president is withdrawing money at some point is exactly the purpose of what the trust, why a trust is set up, regardless of an individual.
So, just last question on this. So you're not saying whether or not it has changed, just to clarify. You're not sure whether
No, I'm actually, to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't changed.
Cool, thank you.
Olivier, sorry.
Thank you.
Same seat, wrong person.
Yeah, that's right. I got a couple for you. One, there are multiple reports the administration is looking at arms packages for Taiwan, including missile defense and fighter jets. Can you confirm or clarify or deny those reports?
I'm not going to discuss.
Okay, and then last August, the president sharply criticized then President Obama for not making more of a public case for human rights throughout the Muslim world, throughout the Arab world. You guys have now said that it's better to raise those issues privately. I'm trying to understand the evolution of the thinking there. What changed his mind?
What changed?
The president's mind.
I think the president recognizes that those are conversations where we can, as I said in the statement, that there are areas of that we can work with in cooperation and concern, and that's best discussed privately in terms of how we address areas that need to be discussed like that in order to make progress on them. I don't think that should be a huge surprise.
Did you raise them in this meeting? Do you know?
Again, I'm not going to get into what they discuss privately, but I will tell you that we understand the concern, and I think those are the kind of things that I believe progress is made privately. Sarah.
Thanks, Sean. I have two. One, has President Trump spoken with President Vladimir Putin about the terror attack in Russia?
Not yet. I know that obviously the president of Egypt just left moments ago prior to me coming out. But I do know that, as I mentioned at the top, our teams have been reaching out to both the government of Russia, the government of Colombia, and I know that there's been some outreach, I believe, to the folks, the government of Peru, with respect to their situation, the mudslides there, and then obviously the violence that occurred in Russia is something that we've already started reaching out from a government to government standpoint. If there is a call, we will make sure that we read that out.
And secondly, Senator Rand Paul has called the reports that Susan Rice ordered the unmasking of President Trump's associates a, quote, smoking gun.
Right.
Does the president agree with that characterization, and what does he think of these reports?
Yeah, I saw Senator Paul's tweet. Look, I think I want to make sure I'm clear, I'm consistent. I think we've been trying to say that from the get-go that there's been an ongoing investigation that we have supported looking into this matter. I will say that we have continued to say that I think there is a troubling direction that some of this is going in, but we're going to let this review and go on before we jump to it. But I think that it is interesting the level of or the lack of interest that I've seen in these developments when it goes in one direction versus where I think it was going, where other amounts of interest that have come from this room and beyond. I'm somewhat surprised in terms of the level of interest that I've seen from the press corps at one set of developments versus another set of developments. That being said, I'm not going to start getting into a further discussion of that. Blake.
Sean, thanks. Let me pick up here. A couple questions, but I'll start here. Does the White House believe Susan Rice may have done anything illegal?
I think I'm not going to appreciate the effort there. I'm not going to start going down that road. As we've said before, if we go down one road, we need to go down them all. And I think at this point we have supported this review that we've asked for. But I do think that when you see the developments that we've seen in terms of the public on the record comments that Dr. Farkas, Evelyn Farkas, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense for Russian Affairs, said very publicly that this was part of an attempt of the Obama administration to spread classified information. Then you see the developments that have happened today. I'll just say that, as again, I'm somewhat more from a media standpoint, somewhat intrigued by the lack of interest that we've seen in some of these public revelations and reporting that has gone in that direction that we've seen in some of the other directions that we've seen. That being said, I'm not going to get into.
And let me ask you, as it relates to Neil Gorsuch,
Yeah.
Is the White House comfortable with the nuclear option potentially being invoked?
The president said several weeks ago that this was something that he would support. We're comfortable in the sense that obviously that decision is up to Leader McConnell to make how he wants the Senate to deal with this. I think the majority leader's comments are very clear in the direction that he's headed in. But I think we have entered a whole new league if this goes forward in terms of Democrats really going and saying it's one thing to vote against a nominee. We've seen that in the past, and I understand that. But we've now gone from the devolution of agreeing that there are certain people that a president has the right as long as they're qualified, right? We've seen that in the past. John Roberts, I think, got 78 votes. But when you see that go in one direction versus now that there's literally going to be the first filibuster in modern times on a qualified judge that's going to end up going on the court, we have really come a long way. And I think Democrats are setting a very dangerous precedent when it comes to how they want to do this, because this isn't about voting against somebody or having an issue with them. It is literally trying to stop using the filibuster for something that it was never intended for, nor has it ever really been the principle that we would vote down somebody who was qualified. Trey.
What is President Trump doing behind the scenes to make sure that his pick for the Supreme Court, Judge Neil Gorsuch, ultimately is confirmed by the Senate? And what message does he have for Democrats on Capitol Hill who said they're going to filibuster?
Well, I mean, if you look at, I think it's 4 Democrats that are now saying that they're going to vote against the filibuster. I think we feel good about that level of support. We've, I think, done a very good job of making sure that we have the Republican majority support that we need to pass it. It is now an internal question for senators to determine how they want to do it. But make no mistake, and I believe Leader McConnell, when he says on Friday, Judge Gorsuch will be voted as the next Supreme Court justice.
Take me through what Friday looks like for the president. Obviously a major meeting with the president of China, but his eyes are going to be here on Washington. Is he going to be making phone calls Thursday night trying to gauge the
I think
situation?
he's going to be, we look forward to heading down to Florida Thursday to engage in some bilateral and bilateral plus meetings with the president and his team from China. Obviously, that will continue into Friday morning, but we'll see how Friday evolves. But I don't think there's any question right now, according to Leader McConnell and others, that we're going to have an associate justice of the Supreme Court ready to go. It's a question of how it happens. Zeke?
A couple questions about the check presentation earlier in the briefing. You mentioned that he was decided to give the money to the Park Service at the advice of council. Is there an issue with him making a donation to a nonprofit?
I think there was just that when given the options, he decided that there was a list of government entities that can accept donations. Ironically, it's not as easy to give money to the government as you would think, and aside from the IRS, and then I don't think you're giving. But my point is that he looked through a variety, and for this quarter, he chose the National Park Service. But it was a decision that he made based on his counsel presented him with several options, and he believed that that, as Secretary Zinke pointed out, that there was some great work being done there, especially that needed to do to restore our great battlegrounds, and wanted to do his part.
Speaking of giving money to the federal government, the president's been going to Mar-a-Lago again this weekend, has been facing calls from both officials in New York and in Florida, either to appropriate federal funds or request federal funds, which were not in the budget, for the additional security burdens that they have faced given his residences there and his travels to those places, or to reimburse those local governments out of his own pocket. Obviously, this is a president who is far wealthier than any president we've seen in modern times, and he has the capability to make those outlays. Is that something the president is considering, or has he decided to make those outlays to reimburse?
Well, I think there's a few things. Number one, the request to go to Mar-a-Lago was something that the Chinese, that was negotiated with the Chinese, and so I think this is a very high-level visit that really has a huge impact on our both economic and national security. So, secondly, the president has an opportunity, as all presidents. President Bush traveled to Crawford. The President Obama went to Hawaii often. I mean, this is not something that you can control. There is a security aspect that the Secret Service determines when the president and the family travels. That's not dictated by the President of the United States. And third is, I would know, ironically, this is a day that the President just donated a significant amount of money of his salary back to the federal government. And so, respectfully, it's like, it's at what point does he do enough? He just gave a very sizable donation.
Though that's a very small.
But that's not how we judge. I mean, I think to be able to say that. I mean, he isn't taking a salary. I think he stepped down from his business. He's walked away from a lot. I think I think at some point he's done quite a bit in terms of making a donation to the government. John.
Sean Beckett, Susan Rice, if I could. The fact that it's allegedly the former National Security Advisor who requested the unmasking when it came to the incidental collection of people who were associated with the Trump campaign and the Trump transition puts that now squarely in the White House. When you look at that, combine it with the NSC rules that were promulgated at the end of the Obama administration to more broadly share intelligence, does this White House look at what she allegedly requested as a national security issue or a political issue?
Well, I'm not going to, I mean, that's a nice backdoor into the line of questioning. I think until there's a finding of that, I don't want to start getting into the motives, because we still haven't, again, me getting to the motives assumes certain things in fact that I don't think we're ready to go to yet, because that, again, would be getting in the middle of an investigation. I do think that there's been enough public discussion and reporting on this stuff that I'm not going to comment on this any further until those committees have come to a conclusion of that sort. So we're not going to start going down and guessing the motives of something that is not assumed in fact yet. But I do think that it is interesting, that, as I mentioned earlier, the level or lack thereof of interest in this subject versus what has been commented on previously in terms of alleged people involved in processes. So I think there's Margaret.
Sean, you mentioned that Jared Kushner has a team working with him. Can you help us understand exactly what's in the portfolio and who's on the team, and I have a follow to that?
Yeah, I mean, he's announced the Office of American Innovation the other day. We named a bunch of those folks that have been part of that team, and as he looks at various aspects of government, he works with different people in the White House that oversee different parts of that portfolio, whether it's part of the team that's doing the Middle East was one thing. So you've got Jason Greenblatt, who's been traveling to the Middle East and other places to do that. There's people like Reed Cordish and Chris Liddell that are part of the team that are talking about the Office of American Innovation that he is discussed last week with respect to opioid use and others. I mean, so there is a team, depending on the subject, that is working with him, and he is providing oversight and direction.
So he's overseeing teams handling all these different issues, whether it's Mexico, Canada,
And so-
Israel, Palestine, Iraq,
Sure.
Saudi.
Well, again,
all of
remember,
that.
on Iraq, don't go too far here. He was invited by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as was Tom Bossert, the assistant to the president for Homeland Security, to see the work that's being done there firsthand. I don't think to sort of then translate into he's overseeing Iraq is an accurate assessment. He was invited to go see something by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he's doing it.
But my follow on that is, I appreciate how he's in such a unique position and so trusted by the president. But there are people who could look at the situation and say, the White House isn't meant to be run as a family business. There are institutions with experienced diplomats who have
Right.
years of decades of linguistic and experience on the ground.
But, with respect to what?
With whatever these issues are,
But
the foreign policy issues in
said,
particular that
right,
you
can you
laid
just
out.
be clear, though, because you just said with years of linguistic experience, so what situation are you specifically referring to?
Well, it's partly why I was asking exactly what's in the portfolio, because it's our understanding that Mr. Kushner is involved with Mexico, that he's involved with Saudi Arabia, that he's involved with Canada, that he's involved with a number of different issues, China
yeah,
in
and
particular.
I think that there has been, as he has made clear, initially during the transition, he played a very key role in helping facilitate a lot of those. But now that the State Department's up and running, he has started to push a lot of those. But there's obviously people that are going to continue.
Pushing those to the State Department?
Absolutely, but there's a lot of relationships that Jared's made over time with different leaders, Mexico being one of them you mentioned, that are going to continue to have conversations with him and help facilitate. That doesn't mean by any means that it's being done without coordination with the State Department. Quite in fact, the opposite. He's continued to work with them and to facilitate an outcome, but he brings a perspective to this and began doing that during the transition. But again, it's not a binary choice where he's doing this at the expense of somebody else.
So he's a direct line to the president, whereas the other institutions are not.
Okay, great. That's even better then. I think that's a win for our government. Shannon.
On healthcare, has the president been reaching out, or anyone in the administration, to Democrats in Congress? Can you say specifically who? And does he still see the opportunity to work more closely with Democrats, given the difficulties with the House Freedom Caucus?
Yeah, I think the president has made clear that he intends to work with anyone who wants to help him get to the number of votes. He obviously had a very productive discussion this weekend with Senator Paul. I know the vice president has been actively engaged, as well as other members of the staff, with members of the House in particular. And they're going to continue to try to find a way forward. But there are some, I'm not going to expose every member that's had some of these. Some of them want to back channel this to offer solutions and constructive ways forward. But those conversations are happening at several levels within the White House to see if we can find a way forward to get the number of requisite votes. But the president continues to work hard. He's having these conversations. Members have reached out to him to make their suggestions known, and so that's. But we continue to feel optimistic in the sense that there's a lot of constructive ideas that are coming to the table to get us to a way forward on healthcare. I just want to make one admin announcement. Tomorrow, the president is, as I mentioned, he's giving a speech tomorrow with a roundtable of CEOs on the American workforce, and then tomorrow he'll be speaking again at the American National Building Trades Union. So we'll have some kind of background briefing before the day because he is speaking live. So we will, on the guidance tomorrow, have something for you in terms of what we'll do for a briefing. We're working on that now.